5 years later, when Jamie and Dakota meet again. Sometimes closure comes in the form of a smile. London, 5 years later. Early autumn morning. London is as damp as ever, but in the October chill, there is an indescribable sense of peace. The city has changed, the cobblestones are brighter, the crowds are busier, but for Jamie Dornan, everything still lingers with the slow breath of memory. He walks through Covent Garden, a grey wool coat draped over his shoulders, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. 10 years as an actor, hundreds of roles, thousands of shining moments, but none of them have left him with the same aftertaste as Christian Grey, or rather, the woman who has accompanied him through all those years. Dakota Johnson. 5 years have passed since the letter was leaked, since the Lighthouse Trio made Hollywood sob, since that final goodbye on the Irish coast. Life went on, loud and quiet. He made films, won awards, became a father, wrote songs. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, he wondered, was she happy? The bookshop on St. Martin's Street. London is not a city where it's easy to meet someone again. But fate, as usual, always smiled. That afternoon, Jamie stopped by a small bookshop on St. Martin's Street, a place he often went to when he needed a little peace. He looked for Alain de Botton's On Love, the book he had given Dakota in 2015. As he lifted his head from the shelf, he heard a familiar voice, soft, slightly hoarse, a voice he had heard in hundreds of hours of footage, in thousands of memories. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Jamie turned around. And the world stopped. Dakota stood there, her hair longer, her eyes darker, but still smiling, the same smile that slowed time. She wore a beige sweater, a leather notebook in her hand, no makeup, just her usual casual look. In that moment, the world outside the window, the honking of cars, the rain, the passing people, disappeared. "Dakota," he said softly. She smiled, a smile both shy and warm. "Long time no see." An unplanned conversation. They sat in the corner of the coffee shop inside the bookstore. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. There was no need to say anything more. The cappuccinos in front of them had gone cold, but old memories seemed to come flooding back, warm, spicy, but gentle. "I read your book," Dakota said, her voice low. Still the same. It was beautiful. Jamie smiled. "It's the only way I know how to say goodbye." Dakota nodded, looking down at her coffee, where the foam had drawn a small heart. "You said goodbye so gracefully. I admire that." A long silence. Only the sound of rain falling outside the window, falling to the rhythm of the hearts of two people who had loved, been hurt, and then let go. The distance between them. Over the past 5 years, they had both grown, not just professionally, but also spiritually. Jamie was no longer a man torn between two worlds. He had learned to forgive, to turn memories into art. And Dakota, through her roles and trials, had become a woman who loved herself, no longer hiding from the past. They looked at each other, no longer longing, but understanding. "Do you still think about it?" she asked. "Sometimes," Jamie replied, "but it doesn't hurt anymore." "Me too," Dakota said softly. "It's strange, isn't it? How something that once broke us, can now make us smile." He smiled. "Maybe that's what time is for." A walk in memory. After leaving the bookshop, they walked along the Thames. London was hazy in the fog, the lights reflecting off the sparkling water. They talked about the years gone by, the roles, the successes, the songs, the wounds healed. No one mentioned the lighthouse or the letter, but they both knew they still existed, quietly, between heartbeats. Dakota told them she had just finished directing her first independent film. "It's about two people meeting again after years apart," she laughed. "Is it a happy ending?" Jamie asked. "Depends on what you call happiness," she replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. They laughed together, the familiar laugh that London had been missing for the past 5 years. The Bridge of Light. When they reached Waterloo Bridge, light rain began to fall. Jamie took off his jacket and draped it over Dakota's shoulders. She didn't object. The golden light of the river reflected the two figures standing side by side, not two old people, but two new versions of themselves, mature, quiet, peaceful. You know, Jamie said, I used to think closure meant forgetting. But it doesn't, it means remembering without pain. Dakota nodded. And loving without need. A drop of rain fell on her eyelid. Jamie brushed it away, an old instinct, as light as a breath. She didn't flinch. In that moment, Hollywood was gone, the past was gone, there was no one but them. Just two souls, each broken, finding each other in the city where all stories had endings. Letter home. Dakota opened her bag and took out a neatly folded piece of old paper. I still have this, she said. It's yours. Jamie looked at the paper, a smile on her lips. I thought it was lost. Me too, she said. But there are words I don't want to forget. She handed the paper to him. He didn't open it, just held it tightly in his hand. I never said thank you, she said. I just said that, he smiled. A moment between words. They both stood still, watching the river flow. Without words, they knew that all the unsaid things had been said. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Dakota asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jamie looked at her for a long moment and then said, I did, but if things had been different, we wouldn't be who we are now. And I like who we are now. She smiled, her eyes sparkling. You always know how to end a story. He replied. This story does not end. It just changes the chapter. Dawn after the rain. The sky was lightening, the dawn light filtered through the clouds, painting the river gold. The rain had stopped. Dakota turned to him. I should go. I know. She walked slowly, but halfway across the bridge, she turned and said softly, her voice mingling with the wind. Jamie? He looked up. If you write again, she smiled, don't keep it this time. Jamie smiled, as light as a breath after 5 long years. I won't. A piece of paper left behind. As Dakota disappeared into the London fog, Jamie stopped by the bridge railing. He opened the old envelope in his hands. Inside was the letter from years ago, now yellowed, but with a new line in a different handwriting, from Dakota. I read this when I needed courage. Thank you for giving me peace. He gently folded it, put it in his pocket, and whispered. Goodbye, Anna. No more tears. Just a smile, soft, sincere, and light as the wind. The song ends. That night, Jamie returned to his small studio. He wrote music late into the night, for the first time in years. The melody was not sad, not haunting, just warm and quiet, like the breath of someone who understood that love was not meant to be kept, but to be remembered. He called the song London, 7 a.m. The lyrics were just a few lines. We meet again, not to stay, but to prove that we have weathered the storm. Love never ends, it just finds another way. The song was released quietly, without advertising, without promotion. But within days, millions of people had heard and realized. It was the final chapter of a story that had moved the world to tears. A whisper echoed through the city. One morning, when the song came on the radio in London, Dakota heard it. She stopped the car, opened the window, and let the wind carry the music. The melody was familiar, warm, gentle, but full of hope. She smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered. I hear you, Jamie. A tear fell, but this time it was not from pain, but from peace. Lighthouse in London. A few months later, Jamie organized a small exhibition called The Lighthouse Keeper, a display of photographs he had taken during his years of self-healing. One of the most striking, Waterloo Bridge in the fog, with a small caption below the frame. Sometimes the light finds its way back. Unbeknownst to anyone, the first woman to visit the exhibition, early in the morning before the opening, was Dakota Johnson. She stood for a long time in front of the photograph, touching the glass and smiling. Then she left a small, nameless note with just 4 words. The light remains. Last scene. Late at night, London was quiet. Jamie stepped out onto the balcony of his small apartment in Notting Hill, looking down at the yellow lights on the street. The wind carried the smell of rain, coffee and memories. He closed his eyes, listening to the song, The Lighthouse. In the distance, someone was playing a guitar outside. Jamie said softly, as if to himself, "Maybe some love stories never end. They just learn to breathe differently." He looked to the east, where the sky was beginning to lighten, and somewhere in the sea of city lights, a glimmer of light still lingered. The epilogue, hope in silence. No more kisses, no more promises, no more noisy endings. Just 2 people who had loved, lost, and now, found peace in knowing they loved the right person, even if the timing was wrong. In the chaotic world of fame and glory, they had learned the most important thing. Love doesn't always mean forever. Sometimes, enough is enough. 5 years later, Jamie and Dakota don't find each other to start over. They find each other to end things that words can't express. As London falls into darkness, the last light from the lighthouse reflects in the grey sky, a reminder. True love never dies, it just changes shape, changes appearance, and continues to light up the hearts that remember.